So here it is, guys, the latest one to roll through the workshop. It's another pseudo classic. It's a 90s Ford. You know I love the old Fords, and this one is no different. A cheeky little Fiesta. So it's on an M-Reg. It's a 1994 car, but what I really liked about this one was it was a local car from new, and it has done just 51,000 miles. It's a completely standard interior with the exception of this rather delightful racing steering wheel. I do have the standard wheel in the boot. And it has been lowered. Now, when I say it's been lowered, I think it's been put on cut springs because it rides a little bit bouncy. So that's something I definitely have to sort out. I don't mind the lowered look, but I want it to be done properly. I don't agree with cut springs. I think they're probably a little bit unsafe. And as I say, the ride isn't perfect. Something else you'll notice, there's something missing from right here. The car sounds a little bit gruff because the back box is completely missing. I don't know what happened to that. The car didn't come with one, so it's either fallen off or been cut off, removed at some point in this car's life. I'm not sure. The car has got some service history with it, but not up to speed. So I'm gonna have to give the thing a proper service before it goes on. And you can see generally it looks a little bit tired. So what is the plan for this one? Well, what I'm hoping to do here is enable a young person or someone who wants to get into the classic Ford market, who doesn't have a huge budget, very deep pockets. I wanna help them get into the scene. So what I'm hoping to do with this little Fiesta is make it as nice of an example as possible. A few little touches like keeping it lowered, but on proper lowering springs and shocks. Possibly refurbish these wheels, which I think may be Sierra Cosworth wheels. I'm sure you guys in the comments will let me know for sure, but I'm pretty sure these are Sierra Cosworth wheels. Keep those on there, but with a refurb. I think the tyres are pretty good, but I'll check them when I take the wheels off. Basically make the thing look as smart as possible. It's only a little 1.1, so it's never going to set the world on fire, but it does mean cheap insurance, cheap tax, etc. So probably a good first or second car for a young person who likes the classic Ford scene. As you can see here, it's very dusty, very tired, but even if I cleaned it up, the paint is really quite faded. So it's going to need a full paint correction and detail just to make it really pop. I've looked at the MOT history. It's only about 10 days left on the MOT at the moment, but according to last year's MOT, there was an advisory on the CV boot on the near side. So that needs sorting. And there's also a little chip in the windscreen, but it's not in zone A where you will see it from the driver's position. So it's just an advisory. I'm not sure if I can get another windscreen for this car. I'll have to look into it, but if I can't, that'll just have to remain. As it's not in the field of view of the driver, it's not the end of the world. But at the moment, the plan is to tidy it up, get it through an MOT as cleanly as possible, make it as good as it possibly can be, and keep it as cheap as I can for someone who wants, as I say, an entry into the classic Ford market without spending an absolute fortune. So what other issues am I aware of? Well, the car drives all right. As I say, it's quite bouncy on these cut springs. That's due to be addressed. It sounds a little bit gruff, no exhaust, I've covered that, but something that is really odd and is quite annoying when you are driving and you're using this as a delightful racing steering wheel, there's quite a lot of play in the column. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are 4 bushings in this column and they are prone to failure on these old examples, so I'm suspecting those. So I'm going to have to strip that column down, have a look, see what the bushes are like. Hopefully sort it out, get the play out of there, because the rack itself seems to be fine. It's just the column that's got play in it. So I'm assuming that's the case. Once that's done, I will change that steering wheel back to the original, assuming it's the correct original wheel in the boot. I think it is. And then give everything a clean up. The only real damage I can talk of, well, it's not really damage, but there's this kind of stain or something on the original material of the driver's seat. I'll do my best to get rid of it, but it feels quite crusty. So how easy that'll be, I'm not really sure. Other than that, keep everything standard, totally clean. It has got an aftermarket stereo in it, a CD player, but that's a good thing because the original head unit wouldn't have been up to much anyway. So to have that aftermarket one's probably a good thing. You may also notice there are no window winders fitted at the moment. That is because the retaining clips had been removed and lost. So as soon as you shut the door, the winder fell off. I do have both winding handles and I've bought a new set of retaining clips already. So they'll get refitted. But the reason I haven't done that yet is I'm probably going to take these door cards off to give them a good clean up and also to sort the next issue. These mirrors, there are no adjusters sticking out of here, which is really weird. So you can't adjust the mirrors from inside the car. Also, one of them has got a replacement mirror glass, which is a magnifying glass, and the other one is not. So it's quite confusing when you're using your mirrors. So I want to change those mirrors, or at least the glasses, back to how they should be properly, and also fit new cowlings with adjusters so they can be used from inside the car. So little bit of waffle there, but it hopefully tells you what I'm going to do with this little Fiesta. Now, it's only done 51,000 miles from new, so I think if I can get it right, if I can make this look like a smart little example with a good MOT, with a fresh service, ready to go for someone, I think it'll represent a very useful and satisfactory entry into the Ford market. more so the classic Ford market, which, as we all know, can be a very, very expensive place to be these days. I want to try and buck that trend. So stay with me. I'm going to hopefully turn this one around nice and quickly and make this car look a lot better for hopefully not a huge amount of effort, and then we'll get it sold. So stay tuned and we'll get on with that. Okay, so what I figured out is there is actually a bush missing. It's not just worn out, it's completely missing. I've had this column out once or twice and I couldn't figure it out first time round, but having put it back in and had a look at where is loose, what I've realised is where this paint has worn, clearly there should be something there. Now, that goes through the structure of the car, through the actual physical metal of the bulkhead, through an opening like that. So there's a bit of a gap between this collapsible column and the actual metal it sits in. There should be a nylon bush that sits in there. It's completely missing. So someone's had this apart in the past. They've either broken it or just straight up lost it. And that's what's causing the problems, because even when this is in place and tightened as well as it should be here, as you can imagine, when the steering wheel is mounted at this end, the sort of force that you can apply to this column, the leverage if you will, allows this end to move a lot more than you'd imagine. So that's what I'm missing. What I need to do now is track down another nylon bush for this. That's easier said than done, so I'm just waiting for a call back from my local Ford parts guy. I'll speak to him, see if he can get me a part number if he can't find me the part itself. Worst case, it's going to be some measurements of this and the actual bulkhead support bracket itself, and then I'll have to make something up because I just can't have that column flopping about. It's just not right. So that's where we are. It's taken a bit of fiddling to get to this stage, but these things happen. Old cars that have been worked on in the past, and people do lose parts. So that's where we're at. I'll come back to you when I've come up with a solution. Okay, I think I finally found a solution. Obviously I can't get the proper nylon bush that this car needs. My normal parts suppliers in the local town, 2 or 3 of them, none of them get it, unsurprisingly. So I've spoken to Ford, who've been less than helpful. First time around, the parts department weren't available and they haven't called me back. That was hours ago. I've tried to call them again since, now they're just not answering. So Ford parts, unfortunately, this time have really let me down. But I've got a solution here, and it's something you might not expect. This is actually what's known as a downpipe socket. So this is something to do with domestic plumbing, essentially. This is on the gutters of your house, where the downpipe comes down. This is a socket which will change one size into another size downpipe. So just a plastic insert, essentially. Now, taking measurements from this collapsible column, the external diameter of this is 51 mil. The internal diameter of this is about 50.5 mil, so that needs a little bit taking out to slot over this. But the external diameter, the car is 55 mil, so that needs to be 55 mil width. This is about 54.5, so it's just shy on all measurements. However, I think by the time I've taken a little bit out of the inside and maybe done a couple of wraps on the outside, that will be a proper snug fit. Now, obviously I need to cut this because this is a multi-stage socket for different size downpipes on the drainage system. Obviously it's not needed for that anymore, so I'm going to cut it back to this first line, which is the dimensions I need it to be. So anyway, it's just an example of how sometimes you've got to think outside the box a little bit, and a bit of a quirky solution, but it'll certainly be better than what was in there before, i.e. nothing, and a Ratley steering column. So think outside the box a little bit sometimes, and you find these quite neat solutions. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, cut this up, make this fit onto this collapsible column, into the car, and we'll see how much that improves things. Okay, so that is absolutely solid as a rock now, totally sorted. There's a small bit of play that you can probably hear on my mic, but that is the steering lock on this ring here. The actual column itself is absolutely rock solid. I couldn't be happier with that repair, considering the original official part was completely unavailable. That little plumbing spigot, that cost me less than £4 at a local DIY store. You saw me wrap around a little bit of duct tape. I over wrapped it, tried to fit it, knew it wouldn't necessarily go in, and I removed it one wrap at a time just to get an exact tight fit. I actually only had to take off one wrap of the tape to get an exact tight fit, but that has done the world of good. So that steering column is now completely sorted. What I've got to do is put everything back together and then look at what's next on the list. Okay guys, now that the wheels have been sent off for refurb, obviously I've got to wait for those to come back. The car is without wheels and it's on the ramp. I may as well get on with the oily bits. The car is due to have a service, but something I want to tackle first are these CV boots. They have been previously advised, or at least this side, the near side, has been advised in the past as having a slight crack or perish, which is starting to leak grease. I can't see evidence of that at all, but I can see that the boots aren't new. So what I'm going to do is change both near side and off side for brand new boots, just on the outers, because the inners look absolutely fine and there's no advisories on those, so there's no need to disturb those. But the outer boots, as they both look less than ideal, I may as well change those while I've got the car up in the air. After that, as I said, I've got a service to do, so this is going to have filters, fluids, new spark plugs. Anyway, put that to the back of your mind. I'm going to deal with the CV boots, then I'm going to do the service, and then I'm actually going to do something a little bit more exciting. This car needs a back box, as I've said, and I've got one on order. It should be in later today, so I'll be going and picking that up, hopefully, and we'll get that fitted. So the CV boots have now been replaced, so it's both near side and off side, both looking much better. As you'll notice though, I haven't put things back together yet. That is because when I was taking things apart, I did notice that the lower joints were shot. They're very, very loose. So I've had to order a set of these. They'll be coming in overnight. So when they get here tomorrow, I can put all this back together properly and that will be good to go. Something else I want to mention while I'm in here, I did mention when I first showed you this car just now, I think it had cut springs. Well, I was completely wrong. These are actually lowering springs. I don't know how much of a drop they provide, but they are proper lowering springs rather than cut standard items. So what I'm thinking is I may well, rather than change them, I may well leave them, because if they were cut springs, in my opinion, they could potentially be unsafe. That's why I wanted to change them, not because I was worried about the ride height. The ride height looked quite cool, to be honest. A little bit lower than standard, but not silly low. So I'm going to guess these are something like a 40mm drop, something like that. So I'm going to leave those springs on there. So, as I say, that is all going to have to stay apart until I get the new lower joints. But what I can get on with, and I've just been to pick up, is the brand new back box to show you what we're dealing with. We have no back box at the moment, and that is because it would appear it's just dropped off. Obviously that's rusted and just broken. So I have a nice new shiny back box for this. At the moment it's got a downturned tailpipe, you'll see that in a minute. If that looks really naff when I fit it, I'll try and do something to sort of address that and make the tailpipe a little bit better, but for now I just want to concentrate on actually getting the thing on there. So that is the next thing you're going to see me do. Okay, so I got that old rusted bit of exhaust off there. As you saw, I had to cut it and give it a bit of persuasion with a needle scaler to get it off. And that did reveal a small hole just here in the exhaust, but there wouldn't have been a problem. I could have easily patch welded that. But what I have discovered is the new exhaust is going to slip over beyond that hole. So I'm actually not going to do anything with it. A, because a patch would probably impede the new exhaust sliding on, and B, by the time I put the new exhaust on with some exhaust paste and clamp that up tight, this hole will be within the flange of the new back box. So that won't actually come to anything. So just in case you notice that hole and you think I'm not doing anything about it, it's not because I can't be bothered, it's because it's not relevant. It will be completely covered and it will be gas tight. So not to worry about that. But what I do need to do now is get some exhaust paste and get the new back box slid on. So that's the exhaust back box now fitted, obviously much better than a complete lack of one. But here is what I was saying about the tailpipe. I couldn't get one with anything other than a downturn pipe like this, and it does protrude slightly, which is probably correct for the era of the car. If you think about it, that's probably what it would have looked like. Remember, this is just a 1.1 Azura. It's not a sporty one or anything. But what I'm thinking is, I'm very happy with the back box, but what I'm thinking is, we've got quite a lot of length here, so I could potentially cut this before the bend starts and just put on something of a dressy tailpipe just to make it look a little bit better. After all, it's lowered, it's got nice wheels, maybe a little exhaust tip would be the way to go. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that right now. You can see I've pasted up the exhaust flange there. As mentioned just now, that does cover that little hole, so no worries on that front. I'm going to let that go off properly before we worry about anything else in the exhaust. That's all done. So now I'm just going to wait for those new lower joints to come in. So I think realistically what I'm going to get on with next is the engine service. It's pretty simple, might as well do it while it's on the ramp. So oil, filters, etc, etc, usual stuff. I'm going to do spark plugs as well. So I'm going to head up to the front of the car and get on with the service. Well, at least the Fiesta is off the ramp and rolling around under its own steam on the 17s. Now, if I were to say these 17s were a little bit cozy, especially on those front arches, I think I'd be underselling it. But the point of it is, the car's not going to get driven like this. It's just so I can work around it and carry on with this paint correction, which is of course the next stage. And let me show you, after giving this car a bit of a clean and dry down, perhaps you can see on camera just how badly this thing does need a paint correction. I think this is going to come up really, really nicely, but of course I do have to be very careful because given the age of this car, I'm 99% sure this is a single stage paint, so there's no clear. I need to be very, very careful not to burn through. But at the same time, I need to work it hard enough that the paint does get a nice sheen. Now, when I say work it hard, I don't mean put pressure on the paint with the mop, absolutely not. What I mean is be attentive. Perhaps that's a better word to use. Anyway, I won't go into the technicalities because, as I've said several times in the past, I'm not a professional detailer. This is just something I do to freshen cars up. So I don't want to be giving too much advice and giving lectures on how to do this. I'll just do the best I can and I'll show you the results. But I think what I'm going to do to demonstrate just how tired this paint is and how good it can be, I'm going to take the biggest, flattest panel, i.e. the bonnet, and I'm going to do a 50-50. So that means I'm going to put a line of tape right down the middle, and I'm going to polish one side of it to show you how good it can be, and take the tape off, and then we'll do a side by side so you can see what the paint is currently like and what it's going to become. And I think you'll be quite impressed with the results. I mean, I'm hoping you will. Normally when I do old red paint, it comes up really, really nicely. But before I do any polishing, I do need to protect a few areas because of the fling, the polish that comes off that mop, so the machine operated polisher. The fling that comes off that compound goes everywhere, so I need to cover things like the windscreen, the wipers, any plastics I don't want covered in little speckles of polish. Basically I need to do a little bit of prep, but I'll do that quickly. I'll do it off camera so it won't bore you, and then we'll jump straight into this 50-50 and we'll come back and catch up when that's done. So even with just a very, very quick double pass with two different types of foam head, you can already see a massive, massive difference in the paint on the Fiesta. I don't need to point this out, but of course this is the unpolished side on the left and on the right is the polished side. Now, it didn't look too bad before, but it's when you put it into contrast with this freshly cut paint, and it just makes you realize how much the car's going to benefit from a polish. So really the only point of that 50-50 was to demonstrate how good this car can look. You may have thought it wasn't bad before, but of course it's going to look a lot better. So my challenge now is to do the entirety of the car to that same level of finish, which isn't a problem, but it is time consuming. So I'm going to do a bit in time lapse, but I'm not going to record all of it because it's probably going to be just as boring for you to watch as it is tedious for me to record every bit of it. So I'll show you a bit as I go around the car, but ultimately the next proper clip you're going to see is when this car is completely polished up. So take a mental image now of how good that bit of bonnet looks, how dull the wing is, the door, the quarter, all that stuff. It's all going to look as good as this patch of bonnet very, very soon. So stay tuned and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. Okay then, that is the machine polish now done, and I'm so pleased with the results. This red paint has come up incredibly well. This does not look like a 30-year-old car. As always, these paint corrections really can make a big difference to old vehicles. Anyway, it's nearly the end of the day now, but I'm pleased to say that the wheels are now back from refurb. So before I do anything else, I'm going to stick those back on, but instead of showing you me fitting them, I've got a much quicker way. So check this out. How much better do they look in a nice, bright, sparkly silver? Now, of course, you will have noticed the center caps are still missing. That's because I do have to respray those myself in a matching shade of silver. That will be done shortly, but as for now, I've just got the wheels back and I wanted to put them on the car to show you what they look like. So with the fresh paint and those fresh wheels, we are really moving in the right direction. So with those bits and pieces now done, there's a couple more bits to address. You will have noticed I took the wing mirrors off when I was doing the polish. Well, that's because those wing mirrors are not going to be remaining with the car. I've got a replacement set on the way, but I'll show you those shortly and talk you through the reasoning for that. Aside from those bits, I do have to move on to the interior. Now, whereas everything is relatively complete and in good order in here, is a little bit dusty and a little bit dirty, I suppose, so I'll give everything a thorough clean. It's not going to be immaculate in here. As you can see, there's a little bit of bagging on the driver's seat, pretty standard for an old Ford, and there's a little bit of lifting here on the side of the passenger seat. Again, I might be able to stick that back, but if not, it's not the end of the world. What I do want to achieve though is making it feel a lot fresher and cleaner, so this will be getting a full deep clean and valet inside. Once that is done, obviously I've got to refit things like the tail lights, and I've got to address this exhaust. I mentioned it when I fitted it. It doesn't look very impressive with that little downturn on there, so I think what I'm going to do is get a dress-up tip. So nothing more than a bolt-on tip, which will mean cutting off the actual drop pipe and then putting the tip on, but I think that will make it look just a little bit more special. Anyway, those are all bits and pieces to come. As I say, it's nearly the end of today, so I'll be cracking on with that tomorrow. But for you, it'll be a seamless transition, so let's crack on with those extra bits. Okay, so now the interior is cleaner and it's a lot fresher, it smells nicer, it looks better, got rid of that tiny little mark on the driver's seat. I'm going to tackle something else that's been annoying me about this car. You may be able to see that the dashboard looks quite faded. I don't exactly know what's caused this because it's not just the top of the dash, so I can't blame it on UV exposure from sunlight. The whole thing just looks a little bit dusty and tired, but it's not actually dust on there. I'm not really sure what's happened, but it looks as if someone's got talcum powder or something and spread it all over the dash, so all the little bits of the textured plastic, it just looks faded, old and tired. Well, I'm actually going to rectify this without any chemicals. I'm just going to use my smallest drill brush with nothing on it, no chemicals, nothing at all. I'm going to work my way around, and as I operate the drill brush, I'm hoping the little spines from this brush will get in between the small bits of texture on the dash, cleaning out any dust or debris that is in the texture and make the whole thing look a little bit better. Once that's done, I can then give the dash a normal clean as I usually would. But to demonstrate how much of a difference this is going to make, I'm going to do a 50-50 again, like I did with the paintwork, but I'm not going to use tape. I'm just going to go halfway down this glove box with the drill brush and then leave the other half untouched, and then I'll come back and show you the difference, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm getting at by using a dry brush. It will clean out all these little bits and pieces, and then when I finally give the dash a proper clean with some detergent afterwards, it should look more or less brand new. Either way, it's going to be better than this. So I'll catch you in a minute. Okay, I'm hoping this is clear on camera, but this is the glove box. So as you can see, the left side I've been over with the drill brush, the right hand side I haven't, and you can see the difference, how powdery the right hand side still looks and not the left hand. Obviously I've got to do the entire dash all the way around the top to make it all look as good as this, and then as I say, I'm going to give it the usual sort of clean up and treatment that I generally would. So it's going to take me a minute. I won't bore you with a time lapse on this one because you've seen the process just there. I'm going to do it on all of the dash. It's going to take me a little while, but I'll catch you once that's done. So now it's time to deal with the wing mirrors. You saw me remove these ones. Basically, they are just the basic two-way adjustable black plastic mirrors that you'd see on a low-spec Fiesta. The other problem is, I believe one or both of these have had replacement glass at some point. Now, one is fine, but the other one is like looking through Bo Selector's glasses. It's just so zoomed in, it's ridiculous. So what I've done is upgraded them. I've gone for this, a pair of XR2 cable adjustable mirrors. So you've got up and down, left and right, rather than just left and right adjustment on the standard mirrors. Also, being XR2 mirrors, they are color coded. They're not in the best of shape at the moment. I'm hoping that once I've fitted them, I can give them a bit of a polish and make them look a little bit better. Worst case, I'll have to respray them, but I don't think it's going to come to that. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is fit the XR2 mirrors to the Fiesta and hope that it all looks a little bit smarter. So with those mirrors now fitted and looking much better than they were originally, something else I want to change is that exhaust tip. Now, I have mentioned this several times. I've been thinking about this, whether I'm going to leave that little drop tip on there or not. And I think given that the car has come up so well and so bright, I think that little exhaust kind of doesn't look quite right. So I wanted to put something on there just to make it look a little bit more fun. Now, I've gone for just a dress up tip. So that means the back box I fitted is going to be staying. I'm going to be cutting this exhaust just where that tape is, so to get rid of the downturn exhaust. Then I'm just putting a little chrome dress up tip on there. So absolutely nothing special, but just something to make the back end look a little bit better than that completely old-fashioned dropped pea shooter exhaust. So it may not be to everyone's taste, but I think it's going to look okay. Certainly better than it does at the moment. So that's the next job I'm going to crack on with, and get under there, cut the very tip of that exhaust off, and put the new dress up tip on. So there it is, a little bit better than that downturned exhaust, nothing too crazy. As you can see, it's virtually flush with the bumper, which is kind of what I wanted. Didn't want it to look too OTT. Now, the other thing is, it looks like there's a baffle inside the exhaust. There's not. That's just the design of this tip. I suppose I could have painted the inside of that black to make it look bigger, I suppose, but really I don't think there's any need. I just wanted something on there that looked better than that tiny little downturned exhaust. So that, I think, will do the job nicely. So we're really getting there now with the Fiesta. It's looking a lot smarter outside. Obviously, I still have to take this thing for MOT, but there's something I want to mention before I do that. You guys probably noticed when I refitted these refurbished wheels, the car kind of sits nose down, and that is because there's two different sets of tyres on this. They're the same cross axle, but the front tyres are a much lower profile than the rear tyres, which I think looks a little bit silly. So I had a choice. I could either change the rear tyres to a lower profile to match the front, or change the front tyres to be a higher profile to match the rear, because all four tyres are actually in really good condition. So whichever axle I decided to match, I would have been fine with. What I've actually decided to do is up the profile of the front tyres to match the rears, just because I think it makes for a more usable car, and also because this car rides slightly nose down anyway, a slightly bigger profile tyre on the front should, in theory, lift it a little bit, which should level out the stance just slightly, which I think will look really good. Those tyres are on order, they're not in yet. They should be here either today or tomorrow. So I'm gonna have to whip these front wheels off, take those to the garage, have the tyres changed over, and then put them back on. Now that those front wheels are away, getting their new larger profile tyres fitted, I can get on with another little job. On this lower front valance, there's a small amount of damage here. Now, it's something I was aware of, but I've been sort of putting it to the back of my mind until I finish the rest of the jobs on the Fiesta. It's not the end of the world, but it doesn't look very good. Also, where the paint has flaked, there's a very, very small bit of surface rust just starting. So as always, I'm going to deal with that, treat it, and make sure it can't come to anything in the future. Whilst I'm working down here, I'm going to tidy up the front valance in general, just make it look as smart as possible. Silly little thing, but the cars come up so well, I just want every part of it to be as good as each other. So, like I say, those wheels are away, the car is up on stands, the front is at a more workable level. I may as well crack on with this job now. Right then, so that little bit of paintwork on the front valance is now done. The clear coat is on, but of course I've got to wait for that to dry thoroughly before I can flat it and polish it. Don't know if it shows in the camera angle here, but I basically lost the blend of the new paint just at the very bottom of that first swage line on the valance. Now, as I say, it's going to be flattened and polished, the whole thing, so it'll be a completely seamless blend. It's the correct colour, Colorado red. So no worries there. Also, the front of that car is going to be a lot lower when it's back on its wheels and at a normal ride height, as opposed to being up on these stands. Anyway, I'm very, very happy with that repair. It's a lot better than it was. Only a minor little thing, but the underside of it did look a little bit crusty, and now at least it's protected and future-proof, which, you know, for a 30-year-old car is about as much as you can ask for. Anyway, I mentioned this car going back on its wheels. Now, the front wheels are back from the tyre place, and I've got the new rubber fitted, and this is what I've gone for. Falcons. Now, I use Falcons on pretty much all of my projects. Not that I'm sponsored or anything like that, I just think they're a very, very good mid-range tyre. As mentioned before, I've gone for a higher profile to match the rear tyres that are already on the Fiesta, which are in fine shape, and now it should ride a little bit more level rather than that nose down stance it did have. So I'm going to stick these wheels back on the Fiesta, get it off the axle stands, and I'm going to leave it alone for a day or so to let that clear coat thoroughly cure before flattening and polishing. Okay, one of the final jobs for the Fiesta is something I've wanted to do for a very long time. Is reattach these window winders. As I said, when it came to me, it didn't have these little clips. They'd gone missing, so the winders were just falling off. So, new clips, let's get the winders put back on. Perfect. So as you can see, that valance has now been finished. It's been flatted, it's been polished, and it is looking as good as can be. We're outside because this car has just been for its MOT, and good news is it has passed. It passed with no advisories as well, which is exactly what we like to see, especially on old cars like this. This car is now advertised for sale. I've gone in a little bit under £4,000 for this car, which I think represents pretty good value for what is essentially an entry-level classic Ford. And that's the sort of person I think who's going to buy this car. Someone who wants to get into the classic Ford world, but maybe doesn't have the 15, 20, 30, 40,000 pounds for a performance classic Ford. They just want a little piece of the pie. And that's what I think the Mark III Fiesta offers. Alternatively, it could go to someone who's a first-time driver, or maybe it's their second car, and they just want something that's a little bit retro and a little bit different. Anyway, I'm really pleased with how this car's come up. This Colorado red paint has corrected exactly the way I expected it to. It's such a bright, lovely little car. Talking of bright and lovely, these refurbished wheels in sparkle silver look absolutely perfect next to this red paint. As I said before, I've changed the front tyres to match the rears in terms of their profile, so that means the whole car looks a little bit more balanced. The bumpers, another thing about this car, normally these bumpers on these old plastic bumper cars, they're scuffed and they're tired, but these have come up virtually like new. I'm really, really pleased with them. As you saw, I've given the car a service, and with that fresh MOT with no advisories, it truly is ready to go. But anyway guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're not already subscribed, why not consider doing so? It's totally free and you'll see more turnarounds like this. Anyway, until next time, thank you ever so much for watching. I'll catch you later. Cheers.